My Fishing Advisor is an app that can help you catch more and bigger fish. In this video, we're going to go through the features of the app in detail. There's a shorter video called My Fishing Advisor Getting Started, which covers just the basics of the app. But right now, we're going to walk through the app from start to finish, digging in deeper to cover a lot of the features and share some tips to help you get the most out of My Fishing Advisor. The top third of the screen on My Fishing Advisor shows all the important details of a scenario and allows you to choose those details. Those include the fishing location where you'll be fishing, the fishing date and time, the target species that you want to catch, the weather, the times of the sun and moon rise and set and the moon phase, and the conditions of the water. There's also below that buttons for viewing a map, a fish activity forecast, getting a fishing plan, and for logging your fishing experiences. When you first install My Fishing Advisor, it will look like this, and you'll need to start by setting up at least one fishing spot. Tap Add New Spot, and the app will create a new fishing location and bring you to a screen where you can provide as much detail as possible about that spot. First, let's give it a name. Then you'll indicate where it's located. You can use your current location. You can enter the coordinates directly. You can select it on a map. You might also want to mark whether it can be fished from shore. I'm going to use my current location at the bay, and then I'll go down and add as much information as I have about this spot. What type of body of water is it? In this case, it's a large lake. You could also choose small river, etc., but this one is a large lake. What's the usual water clarity? On that lake, I'd say it's typically staying between 2 and 5 feet of visibility. What's the usual water color? I'd say it leans toward red or brown. What is the depth range? Now, not for the entire lake, but for this spot that I'm entering. This bay that I'm talking about, I'm going to say it maxes out at about 7 feet. Current range, there is no minimum current, max current, there's none. This is a lake. Now the structure, you're going to need to mark off all the kinds of structure that are present at this spot. If you want to just have the app guess, that's okay. You can use auto select common structures and it will do that. But the more precisely you set up each spot in the app, the more helpful the app can be. If you see structure that you're not familiar with, you don't know what it means by a saddle, there's a question mark, hit it, it will explain what that type of structure is. You'll see that in the app in a lot of places, a little question mark or a little help button. So if you see terminology you're not familiar with, there's help for that. In this case, it is of course a bay. It's got a shoreline. In the area that I'm looking at, there's really not much open water or points that I'm interested in. I wouldn't say it's flats, etc. So I'm going to scroll down through here. Next, cover. Same kind of thing. There are areas without cover. Yes, there's definitely emergent vegetation and submergent vegetation. Again, there's help for what all of those mean. Same thing with ripraps, bridges, and so forth. But I think that pretty much covers what's in this particular bay. And I'll also say slop, which is very thick cover. Okay, what species are present? Again, if you don't know, you can ask the app to take its best guess. I'm going to do that right now. Based on where it is and the type of body of water it is, it made these guesses. And it's pretty much right on the nose, with the exception of muskie. That's very rare for anybody to encounter one, so I'm going to uncheck that one. Everything else, it's absolutely possible to catch in that bay. Okay, I'm at the bottom of the list, and I'm going to save it. Now that spot shows up as my location. Once we add additional locations, we'll see them listed here. So I'm going to pause the recording and add a few more locations. Okay, now I've added some more spots on Lake Onalaska. My Fisherman's Road Bay is just one of them now. You can scroll through this list when you're on the location screen. And you'll notice that they're all color-coded also. They're rated based on the prospects. How good is the fishing likely to be at that spot? But that's made up of a couple things. One is the features, things like the structure, the cover, the depth range, the current. Does it have the features that are going to attract the species you're interested in the current conditions, this time of year, time of day? If it doesn't, you'll see poor for features, or good or excellent if it does. Now notice that things are color-coded. Green is the best, yellow's not bad, orange is getting down there, and red's pretty poor. So we have the prospects, the features, and the fish activity for each. In the case of this dredge hole, the fish, if they would be there, they'd be extremely active. The conditions are right for them to be active. but the features are poor. This is not a place that you're going to expect to find a lot of the current target species under the current conditions. Something you want to consider when you're setting up your collection of fishing spots is it's a really good idea to identify very specific spots and not just use one entry for an entire lake or river. And here's why. I'm looking at my fishing spots on a map, and if I have it broken down into this shoreline, this bay, this bridge, this harbor, this channel head, etc., the app can do a lot more to help me decide where to fish. Spots are going to be color coded on the map based on their prospects. The green ones are the best, yellow not too bad, red pretty poor. The blue are actually log entry markers, and we'll get to that later. If I had set up this area with a single marker and just said Upper Mississippi River, it's going to be a green marker because there are features and structures there where I can catch fish, but it's not going to do a lot to help me choose which of those specific spots are better for this particular situation. So it's much more helpful to mark the specific spots you like to fish. You can also sort the spot list, whether you want to see the nearest on top or the ones with the best prospects or the farthest. I'll put the best prospects on top. So we have a spot that has excellent features and really active fish. So that's a really good choice for right now. You can also limit the distance range. Is it you want to see all your spots or only the ones within a certain distance of where you are? That's really handy. Minimum prospects. Do you only want to see the spots that have really good fishing? Now it's only going to show me a few. But right now we're going to take a quick tour through all the different screens in My Fishing Advisor. So we've seen the location screen, that's what we're on now. The fishing time. We have a calendar view. Again, it's color coded. There's also a numerical score for how good a fishing day this is. It's on a 1 to 100 scale, so 91 is pretty darn good looking at April 10th. The current date is going to be highlighted. There's also a button up here to select current. It's going to make the current date and time your fishing time. You can also manually pick a different time down here, switch between AM and PM, change the time. Down here you see an hourly activity graph from 12 a.m. up to noon and then up to 11 p.m. from 11 to midnight. So this is the forecasted fish activity for your target species at this location under these conditions. You can also just tap a bar on this graph to make that your new fishing time. So that's the fishing time screen. You can also step through different months by either tapping the next and previous buttons or swiping side to side. So that's the fishing time screen. Target species. Here it lists the species you might want to fish for. By default, it's going to show only the species that you've indicated are present at the fishing spot that you've selected, but you can change that. You can sort by type or by activity. Let's change it to activity. Looks like the northern pike are quite active here. Again, it's a scrollable list. You can swipe through them. If you want help on a species, that's there. It'll tell you more details about the species. Or just select the species you want and it'll take you back to whatever screen you were on last. So that's the target species. Next, the weather. If it has weather data where you are, it's going to display the current temperature, cloud cover, wind, and chance of precipitation for the current hour. Tap that and you have a scrollable forecast hour by hour. If you do not have weather data where you are, or you simply want to override the weather that the app sees from Open Weather Map data, just check this and you can pick the conditions that you want to base your fishing on. The sun and moon. This shows you the sunrise, sunset, moonrise, moonset, the moon phase, and what the moon phase factor says about the fishing, and also the major and minor solunar periods. Those are times of day that a lot of people find fish activity to really increase significantly. So a lot of people like to plan their fishing around these times. And that is just one of many things that the app factors in when suggesting times to fish. And the water conditions. You see the water temperature, the water level, whether it's rising or falling. You can select any of these things. Say that the water is normal and stable. For the water temperature, if you have a thermometer with you and you have a measured temperature of the water where you are, tap the water temperature and you can adjust it. The app estimated it at 48 degrees for this location, but you can adjust that. If you see it's 54 degrees, make that adjustment and the app will remember that adjustment until you come back and change it. So now we have things based on 54 degree water. Next, below these 6 buttons, you have the map, where you can see your fishing spots. The map screen can also be very useful to help you decide where to fish. The blue markers are your log entries, and the other colors are your fishing spots. And again, they're color coded based on their prospects according to the scenario you've selected, your target species, the weather, and so forth. The green ones are the most promising, followed by yellow, then orange, then red, and there'll be different shades of green. The brightest green are your most promising spots. You can simply click on the marker for a spot on the map to make it your new location rather than picking it in the location list. Next to the map button is the activity forecast, just like the one on the fishing time screen, but bigger. And if you have the Pro features, you'll see here text explaining how the light level and the weather and the water temperature affect the current target species. Next, the fishing plan. Here you're going to see suggestions of what structure to fish, what cover, what depths, what technique to use, what lure or bait is appropriate, and again, there's help for all of these. And also some tips, which might include more details about what lure to select, what tackle to use, what rod, what line, things like that. Also notice, the largemouth bass are extremely active, but your prospects are poor. The Lake Onalaska dredge hole has poor features for this condition. That was the spot that I left it on. It says here my prospects may be better in another location, so I'm going to pick a different location. Right now, the runway lights area, it says has excellent prospects, so I'm going to select that. It's going to bring me back to the fishing plan. Now it's selecting I fish shorelines with brushy cover where the water is 4 to 5 feet deep, casting and retrieving with a black weedless topwater frog. Now I have excellent prospects, and it's a spot with excellent features for the conditions. If you have the Pro version of the app or have purchased the Pro features in the free version of the app, you can also customize your fishing plan by making other selections. Maybe you decide you don't want to fish brushy cover and you want to see some other options. Tap Change under Cover. If you don't have the Pro features, it's going to give you the opportunity to upgrade. It's a small one-time purchase that adds these features to the free version of the app and makes it behave exactly the same as the Pro version. When you add the Pro version, you'll see My Fishing Advisor Pro in the upper left, so you'll know if you have those features. Now, if we go to our fishing plan and decide we want to change our options, instead of brushy cover, what else could we fish? We'll see other covers listed here, starting with the ones that are most appropriate for the current conditions. In this case, logs, stumps, emergent vegetation, submergent vegetation, brushy cover are all excellent. Maybe I feel like fishing in submergent vegetation, so I'll select that. Now it's changed the lure. Since I've decided I don't want to fish the brushy cover, it's switched to a black spinnerbait. Whenever you change any element in the plan, the app will reconsider all the items below that item to see if it needs to adjust those based on the changes you've made. So if you change shoreline, the app might pick different cover, depth, technique, and lure. If you pick different cover, it will only reconsider the depth, technique, and lure, and so on. If I don't feel like using a spinnerbait right now, or maybe I don't have that black 4-inch spinnerbait, what are my other options? I'll tap Change. Maybe I do want to use a spinnerbait, but I don't have a black one with me right now, so I'll select spinnerbait, and now I'll see other colors rated. So it looks like black, white, brown, purple, blue, green, all very excellent for these conditions. I've got a brown one, I'm going to select that. So now we have a brown spinnerbait selected. It also suggested, in this case, a specific brand and model, the Booyah Hotwire Reel Cross spinnerbait, as a good match for the conditions and the fishing plan that we've set up. Again, it's going to recommend line. It's going to talk about the activity and the habitat, whether you're on a spot that's appropriate. Another feature here is if you don't want to customize the fishing plan step by step, you can also just tap New Fishing Plan, and it's going to reconsider everything. It picked bays this time, submergent vegetation. It actually ended up with the same spinnerbait. Let's hit New Fishing Plan again. This time it suggested trolling off of points using a spinnerbait. Okay, next we're going to go to the log. On the log screen, you can keep track of your fishing experiences. Tap Add New Entry, and just like setting up a fishing spot, you can scroll down this list and set up as much information as you have about your fishing experience. What happened? Did you catch fish? Or did you see a fish and you just want to record that? Or you tried to fish and caught nothing? Let's say hypothetically that I just caught a couple of largemouth bass. So I'm going to say caught fish. You can change the time if you want, but I'm going to leave it set to the current time. How long did I spend fishing to catch these fish? Maybe I fished 45 minutes. Location, it's going to default to the location you're using now, but you can also pick a different location. So if you come back later and want to update your fishing log, you can pick a location from your saved list. You can enter it manually if you have the coordinates. Again, you can use the current location, or you can select a spot on the map to indicate where you had this fishing experience. Now I said I caught 2 largemouth bass, so I'm going to tap log largemouth bass. How many? 2. I'm going to say that I caught a 12-incher and a 17-incher. And done. You can log multiple species. Maybe I also caught a small crappie just by accident. Maybe it wasn't my target species, but I caught an 8-inch crappie. And I'm going to scroll down further. The weather. What were the conditions when I did this fishing? It's going to default to what the weather data is for your location at that time. But again, you can change any of it. The water conditions, this is also based on the conditions you had entered in the app at the time that you were fishing. But you can change anything if it's not accurate. The habitat details. What water depth was I fishing when I caught these fish? I'm going to say I was fishing in 6 feet of water, but I was fishing about 4 feet down and in no current. Now, what structure was relevant to the fishing I was doing at the time I actually caught them? Well, I'm going to say I was fishing points. And cover, I was fishing submergent vegetation when I caught those fish. Now, how did I catch those fish? A lot of this is going to default to what the most recent fishing plan was. It was recommending a 4-inch spinnerbait that was brown, so it's going to default it to that. But I'm going to say I wasn't using a 4-inch spinnerbait, I was using a little bit smaller one. And maybe the one I used, it suggested brown, but the one I used was really more orange. So I'm going to change that here. How fast was I fishing? A medium speed, fast retrieve. What's my opinion of the fishing quality? I'm going to say it was fair. I got some action, but it wasn't fantastic. Notes. I'm going to say that there were lots of boats out that day. You can also use the notes to record who was fishing with you, anything like that, anything you want to keep track of that isn't already listed above. Then tap Save. Here's what it's going to look like when you have some log entries. Each entry is going to appear with a summary. I caught 2 largemouth bass from 12 to 17 inch and 1 other fish, and the time and date that I was fishing. If I tap on that, here's what it looks like to view a log entry. All the parts you filled out when entering the log entry will appear here, and you can scroll through it to read it all, including the notes. You can delete a log entry. You can edit to go back to the screen and say, actually I'd like to say I only fished for 45 minutes, but realistically I fished a full hour. I better update this. Once you have a number of log entries, it'll become a scrollable list, and you'll have the option to show only the log entries that were made about fishing that occurred close to where you currently are, whether you want the list sorted to show you the most recent on top or the ones that occurred closest to where you currently are, and whether or not to show only the ones relevant to the target species you currently have selected. So we've gone over most of the features of My Fishing Advisor. Typically, when you open the app, if you're not sure when to fish, you're going to go to the fishing time, look at the calendar, or maybe go to the activity chart and decide 6 o'clock this evening, that's when I want to fish. If you know what location you want to fish, you'll select that. If you don't know which location, you might want to sort them by best prospects and pick one of the ones near the top that have the best features for the current conditions. If weather is a factor in whether you want to fish a certain time, take a look at the weather forecast for that hour. Then move on to a fishing plan. Customize it if you want. If when you get on the water, the conditions aren't what you expected, adjust them, adjust the weather or the water conditions. When you catch a fish, you're going to want to log it. What I like to do is right when I catch a fish, I like to pull out my phone and add a new entry right away, but I won't fill in all the details right then. I can come back and do that later. I just want to immediately say, I just caught this fish at this location, at this time, in these conditions. Later on, if I feel like coming back and adding the details, especially if it was a big fish and I want to remember the important things about exactly what I was using and any little detail that might be helpful in trying to catch a fish like that again, then I'll come back and enter as much detail as I can. Now, a couple things that we haven't covered. There's a help button up here. That's going to bring up a lot of text about each screen, what you can do with those screens, how to use them, and also a settings icon. The first thing you'll see under settings is the option to set up a backup account, and it's a really good idea to do it. It doesn't cost anything. What it does is it backs up your data to the cloud. It's going to back up your fishing spots and your fishing logs so that if you ever lose or replace your phone, you can get that data back. You can also customize what screen the app's going to start with. Do you want it to start with the location list, or if most of the time you start it, you really want to see what the fish activity is going to be for the next few hours, then you can make that your startup screen. You can switch the units from English to metric. This checkbox suggests name brand lures. By default, it's checked. If it is checked, then sometimes the app will suggest a specific brand and model lure. The app developer doesn't make any money for suggesting a particular lure, and these are only going to be suggested if the app thinks that particular lure has features that are especially appropriate for these conditions. But if you don't want to see name brand lures, just uncheck it. Then there's a warning here to make sure that people understand the effect of changing things on the settings. Some new users may come through here and say, well, I want to fish for largemouth bass with spinnerbaits today, so they're going to uncheck everything but that. And that's not how you want to pick your target species or your fishing plan. Do that through the main buttons. The only reason to uncheck something here is if you don't want to even see it ever come up in the list of species. Like if you have no interest in a certain species, uncheck it. Similarly, for lures and baits to consider, the only reason to uncheck something is if you know that you would never use it. An example of that would be if you fish bass tournaments and that's all you do, and those tournaments don't allow natural baits, you might come in here and uncheck all the natural baits and then just leave all the artificials selected. Also, techniques. If you have no access to a boat, you might want to uncheck trolling so the app doesn't suggest trolling at any time. So that about covers it. My Fishing Advisor can help you catch more and bigger fish. It can help you keep track of your favorite fishing spots and to choose from them for any given time and conditions. And it can help you log your fishing experiences. So from My Fishing Advisor, stay safe and happy fishing.